A Washington residential purchase agreement is a legally binding contract between the buyer and the seller of a home. It outlines the terms and conditions of the transaction, including the purchase price, financing terms, closing date, and any contingencies that must be met before the deal is closed. In this video, we'll cover how a residential purchase agreement works, the legal requirements in Washington, and what you'll need to create one. eForms, the biggest online database for legal documents. Stick around and we'll show you where you can find an official residential purchase agreement specific to Washington state laws. First, let's review how exactly does a residential purchase agreement work. A residential purchase agreement initially acts as a written offer from a prospective buyer to the seller of a house. It states how much the buyer is willing to pay for it, how the purchase will be financed, what contingencies must be met before closing the deal, and more. It's normal for additional negotiations to take place between the buyer and the seller after the initial offer. Once they reach an agreement on all parts of the contract, both parties sign the document, making it legally binding. So what are the legal requirements in Washington? Under state law, the seller is required to provide the buyer with a property disclosure statement detailing the material conditions affecting the value of the house within 5 days of signing the agreement. The buyer will then have 3 days to continue or terminate the offer. If the buyer chooses to terminate the agreement, a written notice of termination must be given to the seller within those 3 days. In addition, under federal law, the seller is required to disclose information known about lead-based paints at the property and records relating to the use or removal of lead at the property, if any. This is particularly important for homes that were built before 1978. Now that we know more about how a residential purchase agreement works and what's legally required, here are some things that you should do to make sure the process goes smoothly. Include a mortgage pre-approval letter. A mortgage pre-approval letter is a document from a bank estimating how much it's willing to lend a buyer based on the buyer's credit history, income, debts, and assets. This helps the seller determine whether the buyer is financially credible. Offer an earnest money deposit. An earnest money deposit is a percentage of the offer and provided to the seller ahead of time as a show of good faith. It is written into the residential purchase agreement and typically delivered when the agreement is signed. Use an addendum to modify or add to the agreement. An addendum is often included with a residential purchase agreement to add to or amend any terms and conditions, while leaving the rest of the original agreement intact. It can also detail a contingency which allows either party to opt out of the contract if certain terms are not met. An official Washington residential purchase agreement that you can customize to meet your situation is available at the link at the side of the screen. Don't forget to also hit that subscribe button for more videos on legal issues in business, real estate, and more.